Hey everyone, welcome to Fresh Takes, Events Unscripted. I'm Jennifer Selley, and on today's episode, we've got Scott Burns, Senior Vice President and Head of Creative at George P. Johnson, one of the world's largest marketing agencies. Scott has helped some of the world's largest brands, from Salesforce, Microsoft, and Anheuser-Busch to name a few, which will make this episode a great journey. Now let's get into it. So tell us how you kind of got into the experiential marketing world, how you got where you are.
I was bouncing around. I had dreams of being, David Ogilvy or Leo Burnett, and I moved to Chicago, and I really wanted to be in the advertising space. And like a lot of people, I was freelancing and jumping in awful, terrible freelance jobs and working terrible hours. And I got on with an agency at the time, back when integrated was a thing. Now it's a thing again, but integrated agency called Upshot. And at the time, they were all about being really agnostic to the media or medium and just taking on challenges. And I got on with this experiential marketing team. Didn't really know what experiential meant. It was a long word for event at that time, but it was super cool because we worked almost as an internal agency within the agency, in that we weren't divvied up by like traditional models of account, creative, strategy, production. We just, as a group of 12, we just kind of we dreamt stuff up, we pitched it, we produced it, we budgeted it, we delivered it, we reconciled it, and we did it again. So like we all got to wear every hat during the entire process, which was probably not the best business model in terms of efficiency. However, it was a ton of fun. You learned every aspect of, how to pitch an event, how to procure elements, how to produce, how to manage staff, and all of this happening with the fact that we were all like 24, 25 years old and had no idea what we were doing to begin with. So it was really great. And since then, I haven't turned back. Like, I've been in the event, some realm of experiential, since like 1998. So it's been a run.
Awesome. So I love that you mentioned experiential and a long word, and what does it mean? So how do you define experiential?
Like, it has to be a real human to human engagement. I know I get weary where I hear, particularly now, where I hear people talk about digital experiences, or I talk about, my partners who work in maybe virtual spaces or digital spaces and talk about some e-commerce experience. And technically, does it fit? Sure. But for me, when I think about experiential, I'm talking about, human to human moments, right? Really rooting it in the rituals of our lives, right? Sport, theater, fashion, religion, things that bring people together, where you're having a moment that will never happen again. That is what I love about the industry. That's what I love about what we all do. And I think it's why, more than any time right now, is really standing up and standing out, because in a world of doom scrolling and social chatter, our time is still our most valuable asset. And the fact that we can get people to invest their time in the things that we create, I think they have value in it. We see the value in it. Our clients see the value in it. And it's why we can, continue to grow in the space.
So you mentioned digital. So how are you creating that emotional connection digitally? Because I know it gets asked still, even though we don't love it.
You can still leverage technology to enhance and connect. It's probably more important than ever, right? We all have these little computers in our pockets that we walk around with. We all spend a lot of time, whether it's in our car talking to us, or on our computers, in work. I mean, I still think all our connectivity is a huge conduit for information, for creating excitement towards something. But I don't necessarily see digital as an emotional tool, right? I see it as a partner tool to, again, translate information, to get people excited, but through more like content, right? Through the things that we want to see. And I see it more as like a lure, right? Like, how can we leverage our digital tools to lure people into the experiences, to make decisions, to influence them in the way that we want to, or vis-a-vis the follow-up, coming away and walking away from an experience, particularly when we're working with our B2B clients, right? Where we're talking about really pretty premium value exchanges in terms of what we're bringing people in to discuss and what we're asking from them in terms of their investment. We need to have tools in the language of business that allow them to act on the experiences and the information that we gave them at an event. Those pre and post, points of view are really important. Again, and also during, I think mapping communications, information, I think that's where I see digital having its most value. But if I have my dithers, I don't believe you're going to create an emotional response through a tweet or a text or something like that.
No. I think we learned that from COVID. We all crave that human interaction, and it still has to be part of us.
Yep.
It does. How do you keep your creative team aligned through this focus?
Very poorly. No, I'm joking.
I'm
I
sure your
think,
team would be thrilled to hear that.
yeah, no, I think the beautiful part of having a really awesome, robust creative team is the wildness, right? Is the way that they push the fringes of everything that we have going on. And I think the only way it works, particularly for an agency like GPJ, which is pretty big, it's all just rooted in trust. I have to put trust in the individuals that where they're exploring and what they're pushing and what they're challenging, all is working in service of the ideas. And if we're working with trust and if we're sort of operating at a high level of mutual respect, then I know that if there's ever tension, if we're ever fighting, we're fighting about ideas and not each other. I never want to be in a position where I don't trust or I don't believe that someone on my team or someone on a team has gone off the ranch for the wrong reasons. Going off the ranch is okay, particularly if you're trying to push the boundaries of what we imagine or what we can do in terms of motivating or inspiring or educating a customer. But as long as you have that trust, and if you don't have that trust or you see that trust start to fail, that's when you have problems, right? That's when you feel like either A, you're not doing a good enough job in sort of leading the team, or B, maybe that individual doesn't fully understand. They're not fully sort of in line with what we're trying to accomplish. But building that trust is huge. And a lot of that comes from giving people runways to explore, but also guiding them, not telling them what to do as opposed to maybe pointing them in the right direction. I mean, early on in my career, I was really lucky where I had a creative leader who one time we were struggling with a project and he was like, hey, come with me. And I thought for sure I was going to get like blasted or told off. And he basically went and bought me a Jamba Juice and gave me a book. He's like, read this and let's start fresh tomorrow. And it was all just about language and emotion. And that kind of leadership really transformed the way I think about how we motivate people as opposed to like telling him to color inside the lines and do what they're told.
It reminds me at Imprint, we have a thing that get to the root of the problem. We might be frustrated at each other, but we're really not. It's really the root of the problem. Let's get to it because ultimately we want what's best for our clients and what we're trying to create. I fully get that. That's great advice. So when you guys are planning large scale virtual or hybrid experiences, how do you uncover what truly the audience is looking for?
I mean, I think it starts with asking the dumbest questions, like, why are we doing this at all? Particularly when you work with large, enterprise clients who are making the assumption that the audience is thirsty for what they have to say, or like, hey, we're doing this because we did it last year. I think asking those questions like, why are we doing this again? Like, who's paying attention? And just getting the root, not necessarily asking who's the audience? Who is really thirsty for this information? Who are our customers, our clients, our buyers, our partners who really need this? And do they need it or do we need it? And it's a challenge that I think large organizations have where they start to create this, and I don't want to call it narcissistic, but they start to create this world where they're at the center. Particularly in the B2B space, that's dangerous because in the B2C space, the customer's in the center, right? They understand that the human, that's the world that they're orbiting around. Whereas I think sometimes in the B2B space, everyone else is orbiting around them. And it's quite the opposite when it comes to marketing and messaging and getting people to care about what you have to say. So I think, really aligning to what does the audience need or want to get out of this piece of communication? What is the value exchange? If we're asking for time, not money even, but time, what are we going to give them in return? And then I go back to stealing from Rick Rubin in terms of what we're going to deliver. If we can't deliver something we love, we can't expect them to. If you were on my team, you'd hear this on repeat. I ask all the time, do you love it? Because if you don't expect the client to. Don't expect their customers to, right? And love isn't too strong a word. If you don't love it, please don't expect everyone else in the world to think something's great. We don't make art here, we make commerce, we make money. At the same time, you have to love your work.
That's so true. You do have to love it. So how do you, when you have those people on your team that are coming to you that are saying, no, I don't love this, how do you get them to get to that final idea that they do love? One
of the things that I talk about is that we all work for someone, right? And there's going to be times where our clients push us and pull us into spaces and places that we don't love. And they have bosses and their bosses probably have bosses. But I think that there's opportunity inside of every piece of work, everything that we do. You can find parts of it to love. Very often, I think probably everyone in the marketing space, advertising space, looks at an end product and thinks about where it started and wonders, man, it would have been great if, right? If that one thing that we
Oh.
pitched would have happened, or man, if we could have found the budget to do that one other thing, right? Like we all look at everything we do sort of with this like imperfect, it's never completed eye. At the same time, inside of every opportunity, there are things to create that we love. And so I really encourage teams that are feeling, maybe down, like maybe they're not getting to where they want to be. Like maybe it's because they're trying to boil the ocean and fix the whole thing when maybe the opportunity is smaller. Maybe it's a line, maybe it's a sentence, maybe it's a phrase, maybe it's a piece of design, maybe it's a certain deliverable within the overall deliverable that you really fall in love with, and that becomes the thing that you can sort of hang your creative hat on, right? You're going to have your commerce hat, the thing you have to do for your job and what the business is telling us to do. But maybe even within those pieces, there's going to be opportunities for you to do that creative bit that you love, and it's okay that it's small, right? It's okay that maybe even only but like that to me starts to create value for the individual to keep them thinking like, okay, I'm going to make a difference. Maybe it's going to be a small difference, but I'm going to make a difference in the overall scheme of what we're doing for our customers and clients.
What's one of those creative bits that you've done in your career?
Oh, wow. Now you're starting to dig. Now you're starting to dig deep. I used to do a lot of work for Anheuser-Busch, right? And we used to do great work for Budweiser, and it's a hometown brand where I'm from. And coming to it, I think we were always in the middle of pitching work that we loved, knowing that maybe an above the line agency was going to squeeze it, right? They were going to pinch it. They were going to take something we did and run with it. And of course, because they were, a big agency name sitting in New York, oftentimes they got the ear of people that we wouldn't necessarily speak to. But I remember early on, we were pitching work for, the military, right? A military campaign to salute those who serve. And we came up with a line, proud to serve those who serve. It started from like a very like, kind of small, like that would look great on a piece of signage. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, that's a bigger notion. And as it went up higher, the entire campaign started to get pushed and pulled apart. And even that line started to get sort of stretched and cut up and bounced. And it was that one thing that I fought for the entire time, knowing that I was willing to lose us doing the advertising. I was willing to lose pieces of the project, knowing that if we could just keep that line, I was going to be happy. And I was going to be proud. I wasn't a super senior member of the team just yet. I didn't have the relationships at the brand level that I had eventually. But knowing that if we fought for that singular line, we were going to do good work. For me, that was a lesson in, there's a lot of creatives out there who get really precious around every aspect of a project, right? And I've learned that that's a way to drive yourself mad. And I still have people who struggle with the notion of wanting to touch every pixel and every word of every piece of work that goes out the door. And as you grow up in an agency of any scale, that's impossible, right? And it gets back to what I talked about with trust, but it also has to get back to what you can exert leadership on versus control. People have struggled with that, the difference between leadership and control.
So when your team or anyone's coming to you and that you see that they're stuck on something, how do you really gauge if we should really stay stuck on that and fight for it, or maybe we should move the mark a little bit, bend sometimes?
Well, I think you got to pressure test it, right? I often say that part of my job is advocating for the angel and the devil, right? Like I want to champion it, but I also want to see like, is there something else we could do? So you have to pressure test it. You have to do a lot of what ifs, but I also want to see what the individual thinks, because at the end of the day, it wasn't that I just thought the line was good and I was like, okay, I loved it. If Jennifer, you love the idea, if you love the thing that you're pitching and fighting for, I'm going to get behind it. I might not love it, but that's not what's important. What's important is that you love it. You can pitch it with conviction. You can persuade the customer to love it. You can persuade the customer's customers to love it. And at the end of the day, that's what we're in the business of, persuasion. One thing that I hate is the word just. Let's just do that, right? And that starts to creep in, particularly in our industry, as you know, given that, we have real deadlines and real timelines and real budget constraints, and that thing that we wanted didn't show up on the truck, and oh my gosh, so let's just do that. You have to go with intent. It doesn't mean you're always going to be happy, but if you have intent around what you do, that's what's important, and that's what I want to see from my teammate. Show me that you have intent around why you're pushing this notion. If you can show that to me, I'll get behind it.
Love that. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. So you've
Sure thing.
done some crazy things in your past, from bake-off competitions, immersive workshops, things like that. But what's the wildest and most unexpected thing that you've done and ran with?
Wow. I mean, there's been quite a bit. I think anybody who works in the event space, we get crazy, crazy requests. But I think probably the most obscure one, in fact, I was laughing about this a week ago with a friend. Again, I'll go back to my days working in the beverage space, but I remember I got a call from a woman who's now a dear friend, and she called me because they had just Anheuser-Busch had just, I think, purchased Landshark Lager or decided to create Landshark Lager, which was Jimmy Buffett's,
Yeah.
alignment to Margaritaville. I remember picking up the phone and her being like, "Hey, is there any way you could get me like 30 fiberglass shark fins by like next weekend?" And I'm like, "What?" Like,
Sure.
it's just one of those things where it's just like I have no idea where to even begin to pull this off. I've had some hairier times in sort of event production and like making crazy calls. That was one ask where like you started to look back and you're like, wow, 4 years of university to be sourcing fiberglass, shark fins. Like, wouldn't my teachers be proud? But I think you feel those times of crazy requests, you make them happen, and then magic rolls out with all everything that comes with it.
So what was the final product with these fins that they did?
So they wanted to put them on golf courts to go to all the Jimmy Buffett concerts, right? Like they wanted to so like we
Okay.
drive around parking lots with all the parrot heads sort of tailgating, and we do sampling, and they give out this bid. But at the time, you obviously don't know the context, and the client doesn't have time to really explain it to you. They're just like, Scott, don't ask questions. I need 30
Just do it.
shark fins. Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it.
You're right. We get those crazy requests and we're like, why are they asking this? Okay,
Well,
sure, we'll make it happen. And
and I
then
think it's
it comes
funny
to
because I think
fruition and
yeah, and I think it's when you're younger, you want to know. You're like so thirsty for it, but you also get to a certain point in your career. You're like, don't ask, just like let's do it. Like let's figure it
just
out. And
do
we'll ask
it.
you. We'll find out why later.
So your clients have spanned different industries, sports, tech, beer, fashion. You've kind of done it all. But how does working across such varied sectors influence your creative process?
Well, I think I mean everything borrows from everything, right? And I think at some point you start to see the lens of how you influence people. That, as I said before in our little chat, like that's our job is influence, right? That's our currency, right? And how you convince someone to pick your beer off the shelf or to pick your pair of shoes while they're shopping or to spend 7 to 8 figures on enterprise technology, right? Like those are all different value exchanges in terms of what you need to do to convince them to do those things, right? And the value you put behind maybe a small decision is a little bit different than how you might have to explain to a CIO or a CTO and how they want to invest in technology. But persuasion is still at the heart of it, right? Like an understanding what motivators, whether it's storytelling or hype or borrowing equity from a celebrity, like what are the things that we can do that will get people to pay attention and then influence them, right? And that influence can come through entertainment, can come through trust. There's logical trust and emotional trust. Trust is just another word for brand, right? And you think about the way that you trust your mechanic and the way that maybe you trust your spouse, right? For very different reasons. What's beautiful about experiential is that we often, I will joke and say it's like falling in love with your mechanic, right? Because we can do both, right? We can create environments where there's emotion and there's energy and it's a physical space. At the same time, if we need to, we can be super logical with descriptions around the product. Put it in their hands, go play with it, touch it, go put it on your foot, go run. Like there's ways that we can engage both forms of trust to really deliver something that I don't think any other media or medium really can do in terms of earning that for a brand. There's all sorts of different ways to do it, and I think finding those passion points and those moments where it comes together in unique spaces, that's the most beautiful aspect of what we do. And I think even here at GPJ, I have the benefit of working across a number of different types of accounts, different verticals, and I mean every single day we're taking something that's happening in one corner of the GPJ world and pulling it into another.
Yeah. So you've mentioned trust a few times, which I love. So is that kind of how you measure your success based on the trust factor, or are there other factors that you take into play?
Well, I mean, trust is huge. It's a tough one to measure, right? I mean, let's face it.
Hmm.
And I think there's sort of like a varying degree that I look at in terms of measurement. I mean, at some point, you have to get the brass tacks. You can have great reactions to pieces of advertising that don't show up for the bottom line of the brand, right? I look back to the the great work that Gut did for Burger King. Amazing advertising. Did not sell cheeseburgers. And that's okay. Like, that's not their fault. There's probably all sorts of other issues between product and supply chain and whatever. But for us as an experiential agency, we have to show up both on those motivation sectors, right? For brand, right? Like that trust. Do they, all those affinity scores, right? Are you more likely to things? But then I also think you have to have the bottom line results. Like, are we selling? Are we working? Are we driving people's actual purchase decisions to happen? But the other thing I think we get to do, which I think is unique, is that we also get to measure through community. Particularly that I look at what has transformed in the B2B space over the last 10 years, where you have people wearing their relationships with enterprise technology like a badge, the same way people wear their shoes as a badge or might wear the hoodie they wear as a badge. People will talk about, I am an AWS person, I'm a Salesforce person, I'm a Google person. Like, those types of things are now sort of transcending the business culture into sort of defining who you are as a human, which I think is super interesting and why I think you've seen great work in the B2B space to feel a little bit less stale, a little less cold and a little more warm. And we all know that depending on where you are in the program, maybe not everyone is clicking as high as you might want, but I think those areas are a way to get to really measure success.
What are some trends that you're seeing that you think are really going to define the next couple of years? I feel like you kind of touched on that in that answer, but are there any others that you feel like it's kind of trending that way? And
well, I'm sure you guys are all seeing the explosion of AI and both, being asked by your clients, whether it's how you use it to grow, whether it's how you use it to customize, how you use it to personalize. I think, all the amazing things we're seeing online that are real, not real, coupled with just the explosion of content. I think there was a crazy stat. We were meeting last week, and I think last year on YouTube, more content went up on YouTube than all other streaming services combined for the last 5 years. And that's what you just went up on YouTube in 1 year. The amount of content that's out there is creating this gravitational pull towards real human experiences, right? And of all scales. My Chemical Romance is this amazing immersive tour that's going out there that's super crazy, and they're creating a world to see the show, which is amazing for production value. But I also look at your neighborhood venue and people packing in to see the band made up of parents from your school playing cover songs. I think those both, obviously different production value, same human intrinsic draw to bring us all together. The more you see the proliferation of AI and content and sort of the doom scrolling world that we all live in, I think we're going to see an equal gravitational pull to real human experiences that don't necessarily have to be overtly guided. I think more open-ended, bring people together, let them discover, be who they are, make the connections that they want to make, sort of loosening that control, as opposed to feeling like on a content side, we have to have their attention and here's the thing. I think we're going to see more open-ended human experiences start to unfold that are going to be at a premium, because I think that's where people are going to want to escape to, which I also think for us is dangerous. Like I would hate to see things like sport and festivals stuff get so expensive that just everyday folks can't do it.
That's so true. We crave interaction. We just do as humans, and I think it's gotten tenfold lately with just the way AI's come on. But you're right. As someone who lives in Orlando, I get to experience a lot of theme parks, but they're changing with the prices, and how does that affect the everyday average person? And it's wild how it's drastically changed since I've been here for 20 years now.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any AI tools or things that you're testing right now that you're excited about?
Yeah, we work with, we have a benefit that, a number of our clients are leaders in the AI space. So, if you look at across IBM, Google, Salesforce, Adobe, these are all clients of ours and we're customers of theirs. And so it creates this really great space for beta testing tools and various workflows. So, we work closely with Adobe and Firefly, and we've worked out a number of great, design workflows with that tool that really leverage the generative capabilities to get us to places faster, and I think that's the key with AI. I look at AI as, if every brief is a 100-meter race, AI lets us start maybe 25, 50 yards down the road, right? We still got to run, we still got to sprint, we still got to try to win. At the same time, these tools give us, a way to get to our answers faster. Doesn't always make them better, but we get to some answers faster, which I think is really cool. I think we've working with our friends at IBM on some really great tools for like getting to briefings faster. With Google, we're a Google organization, meaning we are in the G Suite, so we're working with them on a number of Gemini workflows, and then Salesforce and Slack, like integrated some of the AI. So right now, I think the key is finding the right workflows that we want to apply and really lock those down. I think the danger, and I'm sure you see it in your organization, is that like if there's a bunch of different workflows happening, or people are testing it in pockets, it's great. It's just hard to affect change across the agency when it's one or two people using a little tool over here.
It's interesting. I attended a conference earlier this year where they had two groups that had 2 hours to pitch to us. One could use AI and one could not. And we debated for, I swear, like 45 minutes after, trying to figure out who was the AI, who wasn't. And it really came down to the AI pitch got a little further, but the messaging was still like kind of off. And the human ones did finally get there, but their messaging was better. So it really kind of showed like you got to have both to get there. Like
you do. And I mean, listen, AI is an awesome thing, and I'm a huge proponent of it. But you don't want to do is let it create a race to the middle. You don't want to get to stuff faster that's already been done, or that someone else has said, or that looks like something else you've seen. Like those are all real dangerous places to be from an agency standpoint. I always say, like, I know that clients will pull us back to the middle oftentimes because of their challenges or where they want to be perceived or whatever reason, but that's not where we should start or where we should be excited to end up, right? We need, as an agency, as an agent for our clients, we need to push their boundaries, push their comfort zones. Even if it ends up not being it, we need to push. And unfortunately, I think at times AI does quite the opposite. I think it pushes us right to the middle where which is a scary thing to say, but where it thinks we should be, like.
Yeah, and they've got weird ideas where they think we should be.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, as we start to wrap up, I've got a few more questions that kind of get to know a little bit more about you, Scott. So what's one of the most impressive immersive experiences that you've ever attended, not been a part of, to produce?
If anyone's been to the Sphere, it's one of those things where we've always talked about we have a great partner, a project agency partner of SpinFX, and we've often talked about how do we create this really holistic, wrapped digital experience of what you could be in. And when you think about the challenges with like sightlines and view, but that is a really special experience. And I've been lucky enough to see a few shows there. It just really is breathtaking. I've also seen some other applications where it can be like ho-hum, right? Like anything else. When done right, it is like mind-bending. I'm also a lover of just like rock bands on stages. We talk about experiential and rapping, but sometimes just like being surrounded by 50, 60,000 other smelly, passionate fans, screaming and listening to music in the open air, like that's kind of enough. I don't know. Like I don't need the digital wrapper that comes with a lot of those immersive things. But I will say the Sphere is pretty kick-ass.
It is. I went over in June just a few months ago and got to see Kenny Chesney, and it was epic. It was a good time. So you mentioned you've seen a few shows. Which one ended up being your favorite?
I mean, of all time, of every show that I've ever seen,
no, at the Sphere.
Oh, I think the U2. Yeah, U2's cool.
U2.
Yeah.
At Imprint, we get to do a fun title because what we do is a good work hard, play hard mentality. So I am the pixie dust guru of Imprint, which means I get to sprinkle my magic along my events. So if you were to have a fun title, what would you select?
I would probably go with like Barstool Sage. Cool. I have a lot of good stories and like quips that I've picked up. Most of them are stolen from other people. If you or I were sitting down, I could talk about industry and wax poetic with a bunch of zingers and stories and little sayings. So like I always have like a little quip for something. So I think I'd probably go with the Barstool Sage.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. And one more final question for you. So as we chatted today and asked a few questions, what is a question that you've never been asked but wish that you would?
Because people assume that we're like in this business, we never want to talk about what we don't like. I always hear about, what do you love about experiential? Like, what do you love? What do you love? no one ever is like, what sucks about experiential, right? Like,
It's true.
what's the crappy part about experiential, or even our industry? Like any good agency creative, I can moan about all sorts of things.
So you got to give an example of something that you don't like now.
Well, look,
You can't leave me hanging.
When you have to start caring about things you don't care about, there's certain aspects of, for lack of a better term, like when we start getting into, trying to pick up trends and people asking me about K-pop, I don't care about K-pop, but I got to kind of know at times I got to care about K-pop, right? Like, or if there's things about like there's certain influencers that are out there that are doing things. I don't really care, but I have to care. I have to be interested and I have to show it. And that's almost like hard learning. It's like a workout.
That's that chameleon aspect that gets real tiring. Where can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Scott P. Burns on LinkedIn. And then I don't do X. Sorry.
I don't either.
Not an X
person.
Right.